welcome back to Something's Happening Here. I'm Steve Hicks, the Director of Podcast Ministries for Talking Donkey International. Today is Wednesday, if you are watching this as they are broadcast, and welcome back. Let's make sure you're fully subscribed. If you're on Facebook, that means like the page and change your notifications to receive the video updates, and right underneath this video should be a link to instructions how to do that. On YouTube, hit your subscribe button as well as your notifications bell. And on Talking Donkey International, go to the podcast page and bookmark it. And that way you will get what we produce 5 days a week. Again, welcome. We are continuing our discussion of hiding in plain sight this week. And today I want to start to inch closer to our big reveal on Friday. And it occurred to me to let you know that we're not just going to reveal like the puzzle piece that finalizes the mosaic we're painting, but we're also going to find some real hope. Yesterday, we looked at 3 sobering verses from the book of Matthew about how many will say to Jesus in that day, "Lord, Lord, did I not do this and this and this and this?" And Jesus says, "Hey, depart from me, I never knew you." So that's really scary. Even I find that to be humbling and scary sometimes. And so I don't want you to walk away discouraged on an encouraging podcast. So we're going to end on a hopeful note, and hopefully we'll build up some hope toward then. So make sure to stick around till Friday so we can get the fullness of what we're trying to say this week. Today, I want to look at something I believe is a problem that is cropping up around the country, and we're going to look at what it is and why it's problematic. And we'll start here with this article by Fox News, and the title says, "Virginia Elementary School to Host After School Satan Club." After School Satan Club, for real. And this is just the beginning of December of this year, so maybe 3 weeks ago or so, this announcement was made. The Chesapeake, Virginia School District officials said it could not discriminate based on religious affiliation. So the school district has decided that the Temple of Satan is a valid religion on par with Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and whatever else they want to recognize, like Confucianism maybe, or Buddhism, or whatever those might be. But they're saying the Temple of Satan is among them. It's equal and therefore cannot be discriminated against, even though Satan is the embodiment of all things that are not God. So let's read a little bit in here. I find it interesting that it kind of muscled its way into the school under the guise of religious affiliation and non-discrimination. But then later on down in the article, the Satanic Temple itself on its own flyer says, "The Satanic Temple is a non-theistic religion that views Satan as a literary figure who represents a metaphorical construct of rejecting tyranny." You like how they just said that God is a tyrant? "Rejecting tyranny and championing the human mind and spirit. After School Satan Club does not attempt to convert children to any religious ideology. Instead, the Satanic Temple supports children to think for themselves." All right, well, how about I think for myself in this moment and recognize that they just disavowed religion. Or they say they're a non-theistic religion. But isn't that a contradiction in terms? Like, a religion points to something bigger than you, and you're telling me that, no, the thing we're pointing to is actually not real. We look at Satan as a literary figure, a human construct, a metaphorical construct. And then they go on to say, we're not trying to convert anyone to any religion, like they're almost disavowing themselves as a religion. So it seems to me the Satanic Temple is trying to have their cake and eat it too here. I'm not a religion, but I want to claim the privileges of a religion to make sure I can come into the space that belongs really just to religion. This is problematic. It's problematic because it's not, that it exists at all, but also it's not just Virginia. Here is Another article says virtually the same thing. This one was in Pennsylvania. And look at the date, August of this year, so just a few months ago. Another one here in California, November of this year, just 1 month ago. So this is not just like a long-standing problem. This is a right now problem. Right now. It's happening everywhere right now. Like Satan is really trying to muscle his way into the minds of not just kids at the school, but the adults who are running these programs at the school right now. Well, so what do we do about this? We have to recognize something from the very beginning. We're going to go to Revelation 12. Not for long. I just want to kind of point out this thing that we have mentioned in the past on this podcast. But in Revelation 12, verse 7, that's where we read about that war in heaven. War broke out in heaven. Michael, whoever that is, and his angels fought with the dragon, and that's Satan. And the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So at its most literary basic, right? If the Satanic Temple wants to claim that Satan is a literary figure and that's all he is, okay, fine. Then at its most literarily basic, Satan is opposed to God. They've been in a war since before the foundation of the earth. So when Satan, in the minds of these Satan worshipers, when he is standing up as a rebellion against tyranny, well, whose tyranny is he rebelling against? Literarily, it's God's tyranny. And you're probably not watching this podcast right now because you believe God is a tyrant, right? Like my basic assumption is that you want to know more about God. You want to get closer to God. You don't want to rebel against him. So, where did this come from? Well, Satan is in the earth, right? We just read that from the Bible. He is here, and he's cast out of heaven. He's come down to earth. And verse 12, which I don't think we read, but verse 12 says he is angry about it because he knows he has a short time. So he's full of wrath. But the world's different now than it was 1,000 years ago, wasn't it? See, 1,000 years ago, or, thereabouts, 500 years ago, 1,500 years ago, in the deep past of Christian history, people took the devil a lot more seriously. And the devil would manifest in more direct ways, even though he masqueraded under the banner of Jesus Christ, and a lot of the atrocities that were done in the name of Jesus. Nonetheless, an honest person cannot read this book and look at the atrocities that were done in the Middle Ages and say, oh yeah, well, they were completely right. Even the Catholic Church itself recognizes that the way it behaved back then was not correct, and various popes have apologized for that. But my point is, when you are hanging somebody upside down by his feet in a dungeon and cutting him in half because he has the wrong theological ideas, that's the work of Satan. That's not the work of Jesus. And anybody with the mentality that we have now would look at that kind of torture and terror and horror and say, clearly, that is the work of Satan. But that's not really how things happen anymore, is it? Satan in the 21st century operates much more according to the words of Verbal Kint, if you know that reference. He was a character in the movie The Usual Suspects. And his line that I'm thinking of, he says, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he doesn't exist. And that's what we're reading about, right? He is masquerading as a literary figure. He's masquerading as a figment of human imagination. And because that is his current guise right now, he's muscling his way into our schools, into our education places. We are seeing less so an advancement of open Satanism and the violence and the perversion and all the stuff that would come with that. We're seeing that advance happen under the guise of something that's much more secular. Something that's simply not God. You know, it's not as overt as it used to be. But we need to pay attention to it. When we read out of 2 Timothy chapter 3, we read like 5 verses, 6 verses, 7 verses of description of the kinds of people who will populate the earth in the end times before Jesus comes. And in verse 2, we are told that they are blasphemers. Blasphemers are those who speak openly against God, right? They are opposed to God. That same verse tells us that they will be unholy. So they're somehow acting in a way that's contrary to God. Not just speaking, but acting. Verse 3 says they're unloving. Well, God is love, right? So they're acting in some way that is contrary to God. Verse 4 says they're lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, right? So they have turned their own bodies and their own sensations into the God that they worship. All of this put together tells us that not that God is absent from the world at that time, but that he is less so present than he used to be, right? Because how can you blaspheme God if you're ignorant of him? You understand? So if you're going to be behaving in the ways that 2 Timothy chapter 3 outlines, you have to be doing so from a position of once having known God. Maybe not individually, but societally, right? So what we're getting at is that the world is advancing. I mean, obviously Satan is the one who is advancing, but he's taking this kind of secular cover. He's advancing under the ideas of rationalism and independent thought. He's advancing under the idea of tolerance, religious tolerance. And all of these ideas are secular ideas, right? If we just substitute the word Satan with, something else, right? We're anything secular, right? Where I'm just thinking like a rational person. If love runs my heart, right? And not godly love, but this kind of tolerance that masquerades as love. You're tolerant of everything, which really means you're tolerant of nothing except your own self. This is how Satan is advancing right now. And he's being so successful because he has convinced us that he's not really real. Just like Verbal Kint warned us in The Usual Suspects back in the 90s, I think that movie came out. So we have to do better than that. And that's what I'm going to leave you with today. When we are going to war allied with Jesus against the forces of darkness, it's going to be complicated in these last days. Because the forces of darkness will look more and more and more like the normal, secular way that society is. And so the closer we are aligned with God, the more oppositional we will seem toward the society around us. That's going to be uncomfortable. But the hope that we can find in that is that Jesus said he has overcome the world. He is the consolation that we're all looking for. He may not make our lives easier in the meantime. I mean, he might. I'm not him, right? But he may not. because we are in a fallen world. This is not God's kingdom here. But we can find hope knowing that whatever we are facing and whatever we have to walk through, we're doing it with Jesus, who warned us about it ahead of time and told us he's coming back soon to put an end to all of the mayhem. So I'm going to leave you with that today. Thank you for sticking it out with us so far. We have 2 days left in this week's episode. And again, Friday is going to be the big reveal. So make sure you're subscribed and come on back tomorrow. I'm Steve Hicks, and this is Something's Happening Here. May God bless you.